Hi everyone, in this video we're going to go over how to teach a lesson with the DLP. I'm going to separate this presentation into 3 different sections: prior to the lesson, during the lesson, and after the lesson. Here you can see an overview of the things that you should be doing in each stage, and I will then explain them more carefully. Previous to teaching your lesson, you should get in touch with your co-teacher to discuss how you're going to teach the lesson and to review the handover from the previous lesson. You can do this by directly messaging them over Slack, or some teachers like to schedule a quick call before the lesson, or you can also just meet up 30 minutes prior to beginning. That is really up to you and your co-teacher. During the lesson, you will need to take the lead for half of it and assist your co-teacher for the other half. And finally, once your lesson is done, you will need to fill in the handover and review the homework submitted by students. So let's look at how to prepare for your lesson. The first thing you should do is review the teaching material that's available. You can find your lesson in the teacher's planner if you're teaching Basics 1, or in your Drive folder or Google Classroom if you're teaching Basics 2, 3, or Intro to Coding, Data and Design. One important note here: slides won't be published until your lesson is over, but you can access by just clicking directly on the slides in Google Classroom. As I mentioned, you should contact your co-teacher to make sure you're both familiar with the topic that week and to divide the lesson between the two of you. If you're teaching on Saturdays, you should communicate with your co-teacher by the prior Tuesday. If you're teaching on Wednesday, you should communicate with them by the prior Monday. And if you're teaching Fridays, you should talk to them before the prior Wednesday. During this time, you should discuss how to split the lesson and decide which part you will lead and which part you will support. While one teacher is presenting the content in class, the other should be helping students with any questions, group work, and generally offering support. Once you've reviewed materials, you should make sure that your computer is ready. At ReDI, we use Google Workspace, which means that if you want to actually access our lessons and all the materials that we use throughout the semester, you're going to need an account that's linked with a Gmail. To do this, a lot of our teachers like to create a Gmail account that's exclusive to ReDI. I think this is a really good idea because then it filters all of the ReDI communications and you don't feel insecure about sharing your screen with students or anything like that. If you're teaching Basics 1 or Basics 2, you will need to have a Microsoft Office 2016 in your classroom with you. You can either download a trial version of it from Microsoft, which is free, it's online, you can just Google that, or you can use Microsoft 365 online for free too. It might look slightly different to what students have, but that's okay. One important note here is that we will not be installing Microsoft Office for you on your laptop. That's just because we have limited numbers of licensees and we need to use those with the students. Once you're on campus, you will need to prepare the room. If you want to have a laptop set up for you during your class, that's fine. You just have to let us know ahead of time and we'll set up one for you. That laptop will have everything you need on it, so you will be up to date and have the required software installed. If you're teaching an online lesson, however, we will not be able to provide a laptop for you and you will have to use your own. All of our rooms on campus have TVs, projectors, and adapters, so you can just directly project your slides onto the screen once you get there. During your lesson. Now, all of the lessons are set up and ready to teach, and they all follow a very similar structure throughout the semester. So if you wish to make any modifications to the content, that's fine. Just make sure it still adjusts to this structure that I'm going to tell you about now. You should arrive or log on about 10 minutes before the lesson starts so you have enough time to set up and get ready. The lessons always begin with a quick warm-up and an introduction to the content that week, and then you will present the first part of the content before having a break. On Saturdays, breaks are 30 minutes, and for Wednesdays and Fridays, lessons have a 15-minute break. After the break and the second part of the content is presented, you will wrap up by explaining the homework they need to complete before the next lesson. So all the lessons will follow the same template. In the first slide, you can see the level, the topic, and the date of the lesson. Here, we ask you to include a picture of you and your name to help the students remember who you are. And then here you can see all the specific topics that you're going to cover that day during your lesson. So it usually begins with a broad homework check. You can use this to ask your students how they found the homework from the previous lessons, if they're struggling with something. If the teachers from the previous lesson made any observations regarding the homework, you can also take this time now to ask your students. For example, let's say the teacher from the previous lesson annotated in the handover that 4 students failed to submit homework. This is a good opportunity to ask whether they struggled with the task or they forgot to submit. When addressing the whole class, whether in person or through Slack, try not to call out students individually. Instead, simply mention that there were 4 assignments missing and let them know that they can contact their teachers or class managers if they have questions or problems submitting the homework. This roadmap shows the overall learning objectives of the course. And in the next slide, you can see the specific learning outcomes for this lesson. It's nice to explicitly go over this with students so that they know, okay, these are the things that I should be able to do by the end of the class. And then at the end of the lesson, you can revisit these goals and check with them if they can do them or if there are any questions. Finally, there's going to be a slide with key vocabulary. This is super important for our students because a lot of them have English or German as a second language, and having the right vocabulary will make it a lot easier for them to understand the content. So here you can see that the lessons are divided into parts. In this case, there's 4 for this lesson, but others might only have 2 or 3. There's usually an initial discussion to get them thinking about what they're actually learning today. After which you can then start introducing the content. Here you can see there's some quizzes. So here, for example, you will have a quiz, and then the slide after you will have the solutions. You can easily put them into groups or breakout rooms in Zoom for them to solve the quiz. And then here you can see the rest of the lesson. It just goes through part 2. You will probably take a break, let's say, between part 2 and part 3. But it just goes on and on until you reach this part. So, as I mentioned, here is where you can review the goals set at the beginning and make sure students have achieved them. If not, it is a good moment to take any questions they might have. So let's take, for example, recognizing sponsored content in an online search. You can just show them pictures of some ads and say, okay, is this online? Is this sponsored content? Why? Why not? It's just another opportunity to test them and make sure that they understand what they learned. And finally, we have the homework, which is arguably one of the most important parts of the lesson. Our students, it's very important with them to fully explain the task and maybe even have one of them explain it back so you are sure that they know what they're doing. Let's look at this example. They have to identify all the signs of phishing and write their answer into their Google Classroom assignment page. Some students might understand this as what are the signs of phishing in general, but what we're asking here is for specific ones. So you can even exemplify one of them in class. You can say, okay, what's something that seems strange in this email? Well, download the file and update your login information. It seems a little bit weird that I would need to download a file to update something like that. So by exemplifying, you can guide your students and then they can continue later at home and complete their homework. And then there's a goodbye slide. And as I said, most lessons will follow the same structure. So if you do want to make any adaptations, try to stick to this structure. Now that the lesson is done, there are a couple more things that we ask you to do so different teachers can pick up where you left off the week before and make sure that everything is up to date and the semester is progressing accordingly. First, you will need to fill out the handover. You can find this handover tab in your teacher's planner. You will see it here. The teacher's planner is also linked at the top of your Slack channel. This task should not take you very long. You just simply need to let your co-teachers know whether any topics were not covered or if you added any extra ones. If you notice things like student engagement was particularly low during your class or that the class was not long enough to cover all the content, this is also a good place to mention it. And last but not least, we ask that you check the homework from the lesson that you have taught and give brief feedback to the students. If you're teaching on a Saturday, students will have to submit their homework by the following Wednesday. And if you're teaching on the Wednesday or Friday, their homework will be due the following Tuesday. So let me show you here what your teacher's planner looks like. So here you will see your name either under teacher 1 or teacher 2. Obviously, by the time we begin the lessons, this will be filled out. You will be able to see the topic, the slides, the time and the location of your lesson. But then if you go onto your student profile tab, you will see that the students' names are filled in here and they are assigned to either teacher 1 or teacher 2. So if your name is under teacher 1 here in the main tab of the teacher's planner, then you will have to mark the homework for the first 7 students or 6, depending on the size class of this list. Now, if you're teaching Basics 1, you will be giving feedback directly through email and tracking the students' submissions through your teacher's planner. But for the rest of levels, you will grade and give feedback through Google Classroom. Giving feedback should not be extensive. 1 to 2 points of feedback can be more than enough to keep the students encouraged. In terms of the grading system, we don't actually put value to their work at ReDI. As long as the student has participated in class and submitted something that satisfies the criteria, then they should receive a 1. If they have not submitted anything, then they will receive a 0. There will be more details on how to assess homework and how to use Google Classroom on a following handover document that you will see. Lastly, I would like to say to please stay in touch with your co-teachers and with myself. We completely understand that some weeks are busier than others, then plans can change from one minute to another and whatnot, but we ask you to please always communicate it with us as soon as possible. If you can't teach one of your lessons anymore, please let me know in advance so then I can find someone to take over with you. You can also contact teachers directly to ask if they could swap a lesson with you, but as I said, just make sure you let the rest of the teachers know and that you let me know also that change has happened. The same applies if you cannot mark homework a particular week because you were busier than normal. Please tell your co-teacher so they know to mark the rest of the homework, or let me know so I can find an alternative solution. Thank you so much for watching this small tutorial on how to teach a lesson. I hope you found it useful, and as I always say, please message me if you have any questions. You can do so directly through Slack or you can send me an email.